When my son said, "Don't come inside, Mom. The guests don't know about you." I froze. For a second, I thought he was joking. I was standing right there on his porch, holding the dish I'd spent all day cooking, smiling like a fool who didn't realize she wasn't wanted. I remember my hands shaking just a little, the foil rustling over the casserole. It was still warm. I had made it the same way I used to when he was a boy. Soft, cheesy, with that touch of herbs he always loved. I even remembered to use the same brand of cheese he once told me was his favorite. I looked at him, waiting for a laugh, a smile, anything that would make those words sound less cruel. But he didn't smile. He just stood there in his suit, his hair neatly styled, looking like a man I barely recognized. He sighed. "Mom, it's just not the right time, okay? We have guests. My boss, some people from work. It's a formal evening." A formal evening. That's what he said, like his own mother didn't belong in it. I blinked a few times, trying to keep my voice steady. "I won't stay long. I just came to drop this off. I thought you might like it." Before he could answer, his wife, Rebecca, came to the door. She looked lovely, dressed in something fancy, her makeup perfect, her smile tight and careful. "Oh, you're here," she said softly, glancing at me, then at Daniel. "That's sweet of you." She stepped forward, closing the door a little behind her, as if she didn't want the people inside to see me standing there. "Daniel's right, it's a bit busy inside. Maybe you can wait a little and we'll bring you in once dinner starts winding down. Wait. Outside." I looked past her shoulder through the gap in the door. I could see people in there. Laughter, glasses, music, all warm and bright. And I was standing out in the cold. For a second, I wanted to tell her that I wasn't some stranger, that I was Daniel's mother, that I'd raised him, worked nights to pay for his school, prayed for him every single day. But my throat tightened, and the words wouldn't come. Instead, I nodded and said, "Of course, I understand." Rebecca smiled, the kind of smile you give someone when you want to end a conversation. "We'll be out soon," she said, and closed the door gently. I was left alone. The cold air wrapped around me like a wet blanket. The smell of the casserole was fading, and my fingers were starting to ache from holding it. I looked down at my shoes, old, worn, a little muddy from the walk up the driveway. I thought about how out of place I must look next to all those polished people inside. I sat down on the small bench by the porch, careful not to drop the dish. I told myself it was fine, that he was just busy, that he'd come out any minute. But the laughter inside only grew louder. Minutes passed, then maybe an hour. I lost track. Every time I heard footsteps near the door, my heart jumped. But the door never opened. I stared at the window. Through the glass, I could see Daniel raising a glass for a toast. Everyone clapped and smiled. He looked happy. He looked proud. But not once did he look toward the window. Not once did he see me sitting there. I tried to keep my chin up to remind myself that mothers do this. They give. They wait. They forgive. But that night, something inside me cracked a little. I thought about all the times he'd come home from school, with bruises, and I'd hold him till he stopped crying. The nights I'd stay awake sewing his school costumes by hand. The birthdays I made special even when I could barely afford candles. And now, here I was, sitting outside his bright house, waiting for an invitation that never came. By the time the laughter inside faded, my casserole had gone cold. My fingers were stiff, my heart even stiffer. I stood up slowly, set the dish on the porch rail, and whispered, "Merry evening, my son." Then I turned and walked back down the driveway, each step heavier than the last. When I reached the street, I stopped and looked back one last time. The house looked so alive. Warm lights, shadows of people moving, laughter spilling faintly through the windows. I smiled, though it hurt. I told myself he was happy, and maybe for tonight that was enough. The bus stop was a few streets away. As I walked, I passed houses with glowing windows, families sitting together. Some part of me longed to be inside one of them, to feel that warmth again. But another part of me knew that this was how life worked. Children grow up and somehow, without you even noticing, they start building a world where you no longer fit. The next morning I woke up early. I hadn't slept much, just tossed and turned, replaying Daniel's words again and again in my head. "Don't come inside, Mom. The guests don't know about you." It sounded even colder in my memory. I sat at the edge of my bed for a long time, staring at the small clock on my nightstand. It ticked softly, as if reminding me that time doesn't stop for anyone, not even for a mother's broken heart. My apartment was quiet, too quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you hear your own breathing. The casserole dish was gone, of course. I'd left it there. Maybe they'd thrown it out. Maybe they'd eaten it. I didn't know, and I didn't want to know. I got up and made myself some tea. The kitchen light flickered a bit, the way it always does when it's cold. I wrapped my shawl tighter around my shoulders and sat by the window, watching the morning sky turn from gray to soft blue. It was Christmas morning. The city was peaceful. Children in pajamas running to open presents, neighbors exchanging greetings, cars dusted with frost, and me, sitting by the window, holding a cup that had gone cold before I took even one sip. I thought about calling Daniel. Maybe he'd pick up. Maybe he'd say sorry. But then I remembered how firm his voice had been. Not angry, just distant. Like he'd already decided where I fit in his life. And it wasn't inside that house. I picked up the photo frame on the table beside me. It was of Daniel when he was 10. His hair was messy, his smile wide and real. I'd taken that photo after his first school play. He'd played a tree. Yes, just a tree. And he'd been so nervous about forgetting his one line. But he did great. I was so proud that I cried right there in the front row. He used to say, "Mom, one day I'll buy you a big house with a garden. You won't have to work ever again." I'd laugh and tell him that I didn't need a big house. I just wanted him to be happy. Now sitting there, I wondered if I'd said that too many times. If I'd made him believe that my happiness didn't matter at all. Around noon, my neighbor Mrs. Turner knocked on my door. She's a kind woman around my age, always checking in on me. She smiled and said, "Merry Christmas, dear. I made too many cookies again. Here, take some." I took the plate and tried to smile back. "Thank you, Mrs. Turner. That's very sweet of you." She looked at me for a second, her eyes softening. "You okay, honey? You look tired." I nodded. "Just didn't sleep much." "Ah, the holidays do that," she said kindly. "All that noise and fuss. You seeing your boy today?" I hesitated. "No, not today. He's busy." She nodded again, but I could tell she wanted to say more. Instead, she just patted my arm and said, "Well, you're welcome to come over later. I'm having a few friends for dinner. Nothing fancy." After she left, I placed the cookies on the table. I stared at them for a long time before finally tasting one. It was warm and sweet. The kind of sweetness that almost makes you cry when you're sad. I spent the rest of the day cleaning, not because I needed to, but because I didn't know what else to do. I folded laundry that was already folded, rearranged the books on my shelf, dusted picture frames that didn't need dusting. I just needed to move, to stop thinking. But no matter what I did, my mind kept going back to that porch. The cold air, the sound of laughter behind the door, the look on Daniel's face when he told me to stay outside. By evening, I decided to go for a walk. The streets were quiet now, the world calm after a long day of celebration. I passed by a park where a few kids were still playing in the snow. Their laughter echoed softly, and it made me smile despite myself. I walked past Daniel's neighborhood too. I told myself it was just on the way. But really, I just wanted to see if the lights were still on. They were, warm yellow lights spilling out from his windows, the sound of a TV faintly reaching the street. I stood across the road, hidden in the shadows, just watching. For a moment, I saw him walk past the window, holding a plate of food, laughing at something Rebecca said. They looked happy and I wanted to be happy for him. I really did. But the truth is, a small part of me hurt. A quiet, aching part that whispered, "You don't belong there anymore." When I got home, I took out my old box of Christmas ornaments. I hadn't planned to decorate this year, but something inside me changed as I lifted the lid. Each ornament had a story. The little felt snowman Daniel made in 2nd grade. The glass angel I bought when I got my first paycheck. The star that used to sit on our old crooked tree. I hung them on the small tree by the window. It wasn't much, just a few lights and old memories. But when I stepped back and looked at it, it felt warm. I sat down and whispered to myself, "Merry Christmas, Daniel." Then I added softly, "I hope you're happy, my son." Tears slipped down my cheeks, but I didn't wipe them away. They weren't just sad tears. They were full of love too. Love that had nowhere to go but still refused to die. I went to bed that night with a strange peace. Yes, my heart was hurting. But deep down, I knew that love, real love, doesn't stop when it's not returned. It keeps glowing quietly, even in the dark. It's strange how silence can become part of your life. After that Christmas, days passed quietly. Too quietly. The phone didn't ring, and I didn't expect it to. The world outside went on. People rushing to work, children going to school, snow slowly melting from the rooftops. But my little apartment stayed still, caught between what was and what would never be again. I spent most mornings sitting by the window with my tea, watching the light shift across the walls. Sometimes when the mailman dropped letters into my box, my heart would skip, only to find bills and advertisements waiting for me. Never a word from Daniel, and yet I still checked every day. That's the thing about love. Even when reason tells you to stop waiting, your heart refuses to listen. One cold Thursday afternoon, as I was folding laundry, the phone finally rang. I froze. For a second, I couldn't move. It had been so long that the sound almost startled me. When I picked up, his voice was hesitant. "Mom." That one word, "Mom," felt like the sun peeking through after weeks of gray skies. My throat tightened. "Yes, Daniel," I said softly, trying not to sound too eager. He cleared his throat. "Hey, how are you?" I wanted to tell him everything. That I missed him. That I'd replayed that Christmas Eve in my head 100 times. That I still had the wrapping paper from the gift I never got to give him. But instead I just said, "I'm doing all right, dear. Keeping busy." He was quiet for a moment. I could hear muffled voices in the background. Maybe Rebecca. Maybe the baby crying. Then he said, "Listen, I wanted to say sorry. About that night." My heart stopped. Those words. I didn't realize how much I'd needed them until that very moment. "I shouldn't have said that," he continued. "It was just, things were a bit tense with Rebecca's family. She thought it'd be awkward having everyone together. I should have handled it better." I swallowed hard, keeping my voice steady. "I understand, Daniel. It's all right." But it wasn't all right. Not really. I could hear the guilt in his voice, and part of me wanted to let him off easily. But another part, the tired, bruised part, wanted him to know how much it hurt. Still, I couldn't do it. Not to my son. Because mothers, no matter how old, still protect their children, even from the truth. He said, "I was thinking maybe we could meet for lunch sometime this week. Just us?" For a moment, I didn't know what to say. It had been months since I'd last seen him properly. "Yes," I finally whispered. "I'd like that very much." We met that Sunday. I remember dressing up carefully, even though I told myself it didn't matter. I wore the blue sweater he'd given me years ago for my birthday, the one with the tiny pearl buttons. The restaurant was small and cozy, not fancy but warm. When he walked in, I noticed the little changes. More gray in his hair, a few new lines on his face. He looked tired but softer somehow. He hugged me. A quick, awkward hug, but still, it was something. And then he smiled. "You look good, Mom." I smiled back. "So do you, sweetheart." We talked about small things at first. The weather, his job, the baby. Then there was a long pause. He stared at his cup, turning it slowly in his hands. "Mom," he said finally, "I know I messed up. I just didn't know how to fix it." I took a deep breath. "You don't have to fix everything, Daniel. You just have to mean it." He looked up at me, and I saw it, that familiar spark in his eyes. The same one I saw when he was little, running to show me a drawing he'd made. The same one that used to make me believe the world was good. We ate slowly, talking in between quiet moments. It wasn't perfect. There were still things left unsaid, pieces of pain too fragile to touch. But something had shifted. When we were done, he walked me to the bus stop. As the bus arrived, he hesitated. "Mom, maybe you could come by next week. Rebecca's been thinking. Maybe it's time we all had dinner together." I smiled gently. "That would be nice." He nodded, relief washing over his face. "Okay, I'll call you." As I got on the bus, I looked out the window. He stood there for a while, waving. For the first time in a long time, I waved back. Not just out of habit, but with hope. Now looking back on that day, I realized something. It wasn't about the apology or the lunch. It wasn't even about being invited back into his house. It was about being seen again. About knowing that, somewhere beneath the years and mistakes, the bond between a mother and her child still glowed quietly. Not gone, just waiting to be remembered. Since then, things have changed little by little. Daniel calls more often now. Sometimes he drops by with groceries or brings the baby over for a few hours. Rebecca still keeps her distance, polite but cautious. And that's all right. I don't expect miracles anymore. I've learned that love isn't always warm or loud. Sometimes it's quiet, almost invisible, like sunlight slipping through curtains. But it's still there, always there. I've started keeping a little notebook by my bed. I write down the small joys every night. Yesterday I wrote, "Daniel smiled at me when I told him about the garden." It wasn't much, but it was something. And maybe that's what healing looks like. Not sudden forgiveness or perfect endings, but tiny moments that whisper, "You're still loved." By the time the video ends, her voice softens. Calm, reflective, full of grace. I know there are mothers out there like me, waiting for a call, a knock on the door, or just a kind word. Don't lose hope. Sometimes love takes the long way home, and when it does, it's even more precious. If you felt my story, please like, share, and subscribe. Not just for me, but for every heart that's still learning how to heal quietly.